Fashion in general is moving fast day by day, not just for us as consumers, but also for designers and anyone whose work is deeply involved with it. Brands present an enormous number of collections each year, mainlines, pre-collections, sub-labels, collaborations. At some point, it becomes difficult to even register what is happening, let alone engage with it meaningfully. Have you ever sat back and realized that we're somehow out of touch with the very system we're consuming? Marina Yee felt this early on as a personal resistance to the speed, pressure, and structure of fashion itself. Long before sustainability became a defined movement, Yee was already working in a way that aligned with it. Welcome back to Fashion Anthology. Today, we're looking at the trajectory of Marina Yee, famously known for being part of the Antwerp Six and one of the least discussed figures among them, despite her distinct position in shaping an alternative approach to fashion. And without further ado, let's begin. This is Marina Yee. Marina Yee was born in Antwerp in 1958 into a family with mixed Belgian and Chinese heritage. For a short period, her family lived in Congo before returning to Belgium in 1960. Her childhood was unstable. She moved frequently, at least 11 times before the age of 15. That constant movement shaped her into what she later described as a nomadic artist. It also created a sense of detachment. She spent much of her early life alone, observing rather than participating. She recalled in an interview, "We lived all over Belgium, moving 11 times before I was 15. My mother owned an antique shop in the 1970s. She had great taste. She always supported me. She couldn't study, and she saw in me what she never could. Because of all these movings, her father tended to lash out abusively towards her mother. Marina started to suffer from panic attacks since she was 9 years old. Friends were not allowed to come into the Yee house because everyone is afraid of her father outbursts, and Marina became a lone wolf. She never related to other children and became an outsider who only knew how to entertain herself by gathering bouquets of wildflowers, baking cakes, and, eventually, sewing clothes. Her mother, who ran an antique shop, playing a defining role. She had a strong sense of taste and introduced Marina to objects with history like furniture, textiles, garments that carry memories. This early exposure would later become central to Yee's work. She began sewing at a young age. Her mother taught her that it wasn't difficult, and she started making her own clothes, such as high-waisted velvet and skirts that were a bit gothic. She wore them to school with her mother's vintage boots from Paris, have a caul around her eye, and carry a wicker basket in lieu of a school bag. She already constructed an identity through clothing. At 15, she enrolled at the St. Lucas Institute of Fine Arts in Hasselt, later describing the area as sincere, authentic, and unpretentious, qualities that would stay with her throughout her career. In 1975, Marina Yee met Martin Magella. He fell in love with her crazy combination, and they quickly formed a close bond through a shared interest in clothing and image. In her final year at high school, Marina failed math and had to retake another year. Meanwhile, Martine went on and attended the Antwerp Royal Academy. A year later, she joined Martine and studied alongside Anne de Meulemeester, Dirk van Steen, Dirk Wickenburgs, and Dries van Noten. At that time, Walter van Beirendonck and Martin Magella were a year ahead of them, so they introduced the group of five into fashion, and they became obsessed. She graduated in 1981 and soon to start a glorious career. After graduated from Antwerp Royal Academy, Marina's career progressed rapidly. She worked for Belgian brands like Bruno and Chardin and Bassetti. She also received financial backing from partners like Bassetti and Hobo. In 1986, she founded her own brand, Marie, focused on experimental creation with patchwork and dissonant graphics. In an interview, Marina shared a moment where their group discussed going international with fashion. I wasn't a quiet one, she said. I always spoke my mind, always had strong opinions. I was bold, at least in the early days. Later, that changed. I remember Martine saying, "We'll never be able to do that." He was still part of our group back then. There wasn't a six yet. And I said, "Yes, we can do it. If those other designers can do it, so can we." To which Water and Dries replied, "Well, actually, of course we can." Not much later, Martine left for Paris on his own. In 1986, she and her peers presented in London at the British Designer Show. This moment would later define the emergence of the Antwerp Six on an international stage. The group quickly found success. All the chances of getting published in big magazines and doing shows with manufacturers who would also produce their collection were flooding in. Like the others, Yee was encouraged to scale her work into a commercial model. But this is where her trajectory shifted. I couldn't handle the pressure of shops, the business, the sheer scale of it all. I found that very frightening. I thought, oh, no, no, no. During that period, I was quite contrary. I'd be late for appointments, making everyone wait for me. I sometimes forget that, but it did happen. I felt really bad back then. I knew I have to get out there for myself and for them. And I stayed anyway. That was the lowest point. But it's good that I didn't start then. It made me who I am. I'm a late bloomer. I feel happy now. Her resistance was not theoretical. It was immediate and personal. I really left the fashion system in the 1980s when I left the Six. It was very difficult for me then. It wasn't really my thing. And when I say this, what I mean is I wasn't into having investors and dealing with the production side of things. I was not ready. It took me so long to know what my identity was and what it had to do with the fashion world. I am a creative chameleon. I am a fashion designer, and that's my education. But I have much more in me, and I am interested in a lot more than only fashion. Among the group, Marina Yee probably the least known figure, but her impact and success at the time were undeniable. Not long after she found success, in the early 1990s, Marina started to drift away and eventually quit fashion. She felt out of touch with the system, but there's another factor. It is Martin Margiela. Here's the guy who made me stop. He took my person as an inspiration. The way I was cutting clothing, putting underwear over. I was the muse, and you take things that feature creativity. The persona, the hair, the makeup. Someone said it's Marina who walked in there in Margiela's first show, and it was. On her decision to stop her own line, she also said, I wanted to be my own inspiration and not inspiration for someone else. We can see Yee directly influence key fashion figures. She was the muse for Margiela's first runway show in 1989, inspiring asymmetrical cuts and overlays. She was also instrumental in launching Dirk Bickenberg's women's wear, for which she worked for 3 full years. After stepping away from fashion, Marina Yee returned to Belgium and opened a snack bar called Indigo in Brussels. At the same time, she continued working creatively, though outside the system, designing costumes for theater, working on women's collection for Dirk Bickenberg's, producing garments from secondhand material in a small studio setting, creating painting, collages, objects, and interior designs, teaching drawing and fashion at academies. This period is often overlooked, but it is essential. Yee did not stop making. She simply removed herself from the structure of fashion as an industry. After more than a decade away, Marina Yee returned to fashion through an unexpected context. In 2018, she was invited by Lila Tokyo in Japan, a space deeply engaged with vintage clothing and archival fashion, to develop what would become the MY project. The scale was deliberately small, with a team of around 4 people and no industrial production. The work combined couture techniques with upcycling and reworking existing garments into new forms without erasing their past. She explained, "Simplicity is a holy word for me, but to use it in this age is not easy. So, I am very happy that I found a common ground in a very fast-running fashion industry." She also added, "This whole idea of sustainability didn't have a name when I first began designing, but I was already caring for the world in my own way. I was very sensitive to it." The project gradually expanded. By 2022, the brand was officially relaunched and carried by international retailers, including Dover Street Market, Essen, and SKP Beijing. In 2024, she received jury prize at the Belgian Fashion Award. On November 1st, 2025, Momo Antwerp announced that Marina Yee passed away at the age of 67 after years battling with cancer. And by the time you watch this video, Momo is celebrating the 40th anniversary of the international breakthrough of the Antwerp Six through an exhibition. This will be the first time that a major exhibition is devoted to these 6 iconic fashion designers. You can find a lot of Marina Yee works here along with the others. I highly recommend you visit if you have the chance.
I think her key signature is like her folding techniques to customize and really to rework like garments. She always starts doing this on vintage pieces, and then we find a way to make a ready-to-wear collection out of it. There are some trademarks that I think, like the darts on the pants are really a trademark. The darts on the back of the shirts, which come back all the time. This is the Marina Yee spirit, actually.
Marina Yee's impact on fashion has been profound but transversal. As a member of the Antwerp Six, she subverted the superficial glamour of the 1980s with a more cerebral and ethical approach, redefining the modern fashion landscape. Her aesthetic, rooted in classical references and the hidden details of historical garments, has always prioritized craftsmanship over consumerism, an approach that's common to all the 6. When we talk about Marina Yee today, the conversation often centers around sustainability. But for Yee, this was never a strategy, but an instinct. She worked with secondhand clothing, not purely because it was ethical, but because she was drawn to objects with memory, with history, and with emotional residue. She considered vintage to be tremendously important, as vintage is intertwined with memories and emotions for a poetic soul like herself. She also added, "Dealing with vintage is dealing with bygone times, sometimes ones you did not live through yourself. I was born in 1958, so I never consciously experienced the 50s. Yet, I cherish a profound liking for the 50s look, a sentiment of unknown and unprecedented nostalgia, almost. Unlike 70s, when I was discovering my identity as a teenager, as someone who wanted to make art and fashion. Martine and I shared this 70s connotation. Her work is less about preservation and more about transformation. Maybe you could say I love to save damaged goods, things that nobody wants, that have been thrown out in the garbage. Say Yee. I just love to construct things really, and taking these things that aren't valued, like empty boxes, or broken glass or discarded clothes and turning them into something that people don't recognize anymore is quite beautiful. Is that a cliche? I don't know. It is from my heart. There's a lot of ugliness and cruelty in the world, and I think artists have a responsibility to challenge that. For Marina Yee, sustainability is not a term for marketing or to use it as a weapon like some companies do. It was about real clothes that practical, having its value in a way that you appreciate them for decades. She didn't do mass production and highly sensitive to what kind of materials she used for her works. Sustainability is a universal notion that's very natural, and back then, I understood the implication. But it's not a choice anymore. It is a necessity. It's not about being green or being a bit of a hippie. We need to do it. And fashion, particularly, cannot stay behind or keep using sustainability as a gimmick when it comes to their marketing. We need to realize the true value of it. Sustainability is not just about what kind of products are made, but also about how valuable they are and how it affects humanity. This is important, especially in our current landscape of fashion, where somehow we are made to believe that fast fashion only exists within corporations like Shein or Zara, but it actually also exists inside the so-called luxury fashion. It's a model business that made us all chase trend, and believe it or not, the amount of luxury products that went straight to the bin or had no value after the season had gone is also immeasurable. The fashion industry has developed a terrible reputation. It's one of the fifth most polluting industry on the planet. Many are known for exploitation of human capital, outsourcing production to the world's lowest wage economies. Marina Yee acknowledged this problem within the system, knowing that there won't be a fast, immediate solution, and we can only start to fix it from little changes in our daily habits. If we want to continue making fashion, we need to do it consciously. It's difficult to do everything, but even by starting to do something that is a change in itself. The younger generation, my son, for example, was born with this mindset. They know through the internet it becomes common knowledge, so society has to follow it, and fashion is part of society and a way of expressing ourselves. Marina Yee told Lila Tokyo. In another interview, she also shared about the cruel reality of how sustainability is used within fashion today. Complete sustainability, however noble it may be, is nearly impossible. An all or nothing mindset won't get you anywhere. I've trial and errored many organic fabrics, but I always found the quality was left to be desired. In a way, it felt like you had to compromise either sustainability or aesthetic. Of course, things have evolved, but either way, it's a hard existence. There's a heightened awareness with people overall. They are more thoughtful when dealing with goods, whether food or fashion. But the constant debate can be tiring and at times complicated. Besides her sustainable approach to fashion, in her earlier years, Yee also stood out for presenting a bridge between conceptual art and fashion design, challenging the conventions of the 1980s with creation that celebrated simplicity, patchwork, and that deconstructivist approach typical of Antwerp fashion. Her approach to design is highly controlled. She often focused on a single intervention within a dominant idea, while allowing secondary elements to support rather than compete. Her garments are minimal in appearance but complex in construction. The simplicity is deliberate, not reductive. Simplicity, which proves to be more difficult than many assume, she said. It requires you to strip things back. Compared to architecture, when it comes to clothing, there's only a small surface to work with. Plus, it's an art form supposed to be worn, moving through space. Therefore, my approach to garment is three-dimensional, a small surface with volumes. My main aim as a designer is to highlight one particular design element and give it my all, instead of trying to push 5 ideas into a single silhouette. There can, of course, be more than one intervention, but those I consider secondary. Say I do something to the collar, then I might also add a pleating accent at the sleeve that brings everything together. However, it won't demand full attention. To me, it's about a sense of considered simplicity. At a technical level, her garments are grounded in strong tailoring and construction. Even when the concept is abstract, the execution remains exact. The simplicity of the silhouette does not reflect simplicity in process. She also particularly attentive to texture and material interaction. Fabrics are not just selected, they are recontextualized. What appears quiet at first often reveals complexity through closer inspection. My designs are always infused with a witty sense of humor, she said. So although my work might be perceived as minimalistic, it's not a word I fully align with. But I'm not a loud designer either. I like for the wearer to discover the garment for themselves. I prefer a more mysterious approach, not so obvious. Marina Yee is remembered as a uniquely authentic voice in Belgian fashion. Momu curator called her work radically honest, poetic, and always rooted in respect for both people and materials. She challenged the 1980s glamour and influenced the entire Antwerp scene. Across decades, with or without visibility, her approach did not shift. She worked with what already existed. She reduced rather than added. She prioritized material, memory, and construction. Marina Yee passed away last year. She was 67. Her death was widely reported by fashion media as the loss of a legendary and trailblazing designer. Even though she is no longer with us, her work continues to exist through a mode of practice that remains unresolved within fashion. The one that is grounded in material continuity, precise construction, and an independence that does not rely on the system. Thank you for watching this video. It's been a long time since my last video due to personal matters. And as usual, if you find this video helpful, please like and subscribe to the channel. All my videos are made through a variety of materials combined with personal knowledge, so if there are any mistakes, please let me know in the comment section. I'll see you all in the next video, and in the meantime, take care of yourself.